Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer on Chapter 5 from Barrio Minton Lenz. Okay, let's just dive right into this. For those of us in the clinical mental health counseling field, and especially within a Buddhist-informed contemplative counseling cohort, it's incredibly common to view research as this rigid, maybe even cold chore that we just have to get through. But today, we're going to radically reframe that. We're going to look at research as a direct extension of mindful curiosity and deep listening to our clients. It's really about taking our profound compassion and, well, giving it a solid structure. So let's get started.
Here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll start with intention and the CAT-CREB standards, move into cultivating our questions, look at the structure of different frameworks, and finally wrap up with alignment, or how we actually fit those questions to the right designs.
All right, Section 1, Intention, the Introduction and the CCRP Standards. The authors Barrio Minton and Lenz totally hit the nail on the head right away with this quote. When most people think about research, their mind jumps to the images of white coats, experiments, and maybe even a Pavlovian puppy or two. Let's just go ahead and dispel that intimidating stereotype right now. For us as counselors, applied research is absolutely not some isolated, sterile experiment performed in a vacuum. It's a vital, deeply ethical tool for effective client care and advocacy. Literally, it is how we systematically work to alleviate suffering.
So what is it really? Well, think of applied research as your methodological toolkit. You don't just grab a hammer because it looks impressive, right? You choose your tool based on the specific nature of your question to support best practices. Instead of just forcing a clinical design because it feels like the smart academic thing to do, the mindful approach relies on finding the perfect question design fit. This ensures that the time and energy we're spending actually genuinely benefits the human beings we serve.
And this intention aligns perfectly with our professional mandates. The CAT-CREB 2016 standards place a massive emphasis on critiquing and using research to intentionally guide our practice. This isn't just dry bureaucratic language. It's a real call to action. It asks us to be mindful consumers of information, critically evaluating evidence before we ever dare to bring it into the sacred space of the counseling room.
And it doesn't stop there. The standards actually demand that we deeply understand various designs and evaluation methods. Why? So we can mindfully measure our own clinical effectiveness. We can't just assume our interventions are working based on a hunch. We have to intentionally and systematically evaluate them to ensure we are truly helping our clients heal.
Okay, moving on to Section 2, Cultivation. This is all about sourcing and developing our questions.
So where do these big research questions actually come from? Well, they don't just appear out of thin air while we're staring at a blank screen. They're called to action by our communities, by funders, or by emerging trends. But honestly, most importantly for us, they are cultivated through our everyday clinical observations. When we practice deep listening in our sessions, we start to notice recurring themes of distress, systemic barriers, or unmet needs. The suffering we witness firsthand, that is often the absolute most powerful seed for a truly transformative research question.
But hold on. Just noticing a problem isn't quite enough. We really have to refine it. To nurture those initial observations into high-quality inquiries, they need to pass through this critical checklist. Ask yourself, is my question actually relevant? Is it original? And, beautifully aligning with our contemplative focus, is it ethical in intent? Every single question we ask has to be fundamentally rooted in doing good. Finally, the question needs to be structurally sound, making use of specific frameworks like PICO, SPIDER, or VISTA.
Which brings us nicely to Section 3, Structure, the frameworks for functional questions.
Think about it like this. Frameworks give a functional form to our mindful curiosity. We so often start with this general sense of wonder. Why is this happening to my clients? Or how can I help them better? But wonder without structure can easily get lost in the weeds. These frameworks act like structural blueprints. They ensure our questions contain all the specific functional components we need to actually go out into the real world and find a concrete answer. Let's break down the three primary ones.
First up, we've got the PICO framework. This is your absolute go-to when you are evaluating a specific clinical intervention. PICO stands for Patient Problems, Intervention, Comparison, and Outcome. So, say you're evaluating the impact of a 12-week integrative couples therapy intervention versus standard psychoeducation on military deployment distress. If you want to know, does intervention X work better than intervention Y for this very specific type of suffering, PICO is your ideal, highly structured guide.
Next is the SPIDER framework. Now, for those of us in contemplative counseling, this one is usually a huge favorite. It stands for Sample, Phenomena of Interest, Design, Evaluation, and Research Type. SPIDER is built from the ground up for those much deeper how or why questions surrounding lived experiences. If you really want to understand the profound, qualitative nuances of what a couple actually experiences emotionally during that 12-week intervention, the SPIDER framework beautifully structures that qualitative exploration. It is all about honoring the client's narrative.
And finally, we have the VISTA framework. This stands for Variables of Interest, Sample, Time, and Aim. You're going to use VISTA when you want to look at relationships between events or predictive factors over a timeline. For example, to what degree do specific attachment styles predict treatment progress over a 6-month period? When you need to see how one aspect of a client's reality relates to another, VISTA gives you that perfect clarity and direction.
All right, last but certainly not least, Section 4, Alignment. This is where we achieve that crucial question design fit. Take a look at the figure we've got here. Notice the direct, unbreakable relationship between the research question, the design you choose, and the data it yields. The huge takeaway here is that certain types of questions can only be answered with certain types of data. This means the onus is entirely on us to match the question to the correct design, never, ever the other way around. You can't just decide you want to do a meta-analysis because it sounds impressive and then cobble together a question to fit it. The clinical need always leads the way.
This table really brings it all home and shows this alignment in action. If your goal is understanding program needs or evaluating client satisfaction, your question will likely focus on what is the level of X, making a descriptive survey the perfect fit. Conversely, if your goal is understanding complex lived experiences, your question is going to ask how or what do they describe, making a qualitative design the obvious choice. The design just becomes the most appropriate vehicle for the intention of your question.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought. Research isn't some extra chore outside of your clinical identity. It is a profound expression of it. I really invite you to reflect on your own practice right now. What specific clinical problem, what instance of human suffering is calling you to action today? And based on what we just went over, which structural framework, PICO, SPIDER, or VISTA, are you going to use to mindfully and ethically seek that answer? Thank you so much for exploring Chapter 5 with me. Keep leaning into that mindful curiosity.